You probably think ancient children rarely survived. After all, there were no hospitals, no antibiotics, no vaccines, no baby formula, no diapers, and certainly no emergency room waiting just a few minutes away. By modern standards, raising a child in prehistoric times sounds almost impossible. Yet if ancient parents had failed, none of us would be here today. Every person alive is descended from children who somehow survived one of the harshest environments humans have ever known. So how did they do it? The answer isn't that prehistoric people were simply tougher. It's that humans evolved one remarkable advantage that almost no other animal perfected to the same degree. They learned to raise children together. To understand why that mattered, we have to travel back more than 100,000 years. Imagine waking before sunrise in a small hunter-gatherer camp. There are no houses, no farms, only a few shelters made from branches, animal hides, or natural caves. Food isn't stored in refrigerators. Every meal must be found, hunted, or gathered. Predators roam the landscape. The weather changes without warning. A simple injury can become life-threatening. Now imagine trying to care for a newborn in that world. Human babies are unlike the young of almost any other mammal. A newborn deer can stand within hours. Many young primates begin climbing almost immediately. Human babies, on the other hand, can't even support their own heads. They depend completely on adults for years. That seems like a terrible survival strategy. So why did evolution allow humans to become so helpless? The answer lies inside our skulls. Humans have exceptionally large brains. But there's a limit to how large a baby's head can be during birth. If babies stayed in the womb long enough for their brains to fully develop, childbirth would become far more dangerous for both mother and child. Instead, evolution found another solution. Human babies are born earlier in their development than many other mammals. Much of their brain growth happens after birth. That means childhood lasts much longer. But it also allows the brain to keep developing as children learn from the world around them. Of course, there's a trade-off. A helpless baby requires years of constant care. One parent alone would struggle to meet every need, while also needing enough food to survive. So how did prehistoric families solve that problem? Not through strength, not through luck, but through one of humanity's greatest evolutionary innovations. The answer was cooperation. Long before humans built cities or invented agriculture, they had already developed something just as powerful. They helped raise each other's children. Scientists call this alloparenting. It simply means that care wasn't provided only by a mother and father. Grandparents, older siblings, aunts, uncles, and other trusted members of the group all played a role in keeping children alive. For modern humans, this might sound normal, but in the animal kingdom, it's surprisingly rare. Many mammals raise their young almost entirely on their own. Humans evolved differently. Imagine a hunting group preparing to leave camp. One parent might join the hunt while another searches for edible plants, nuts, berries, or roots. If everyone had to stay home with their own children, finding enough food would become much more difficult. Instead, someone else could watch the babies. A grandmother might comfort a crying infant. An older sibling might carry a toddler. Another adult could gather wood while keeping an eye on several children at once. That teamwork allowed the entire group to survive more efficiently. Researchers believe this cooperative lifestyle became one of humanity's greatest evolutionary advantages. It didn't eliminate danger, but it greatly improved a child's chances of reaching adulthood. Of course, childcare wasn't just about supervision. Food was equally important. For most prehistoric infants, breast milk was the primary source of nutrition during the first years of life. Unlike many other mammals that are weaned relatively quickly, human children often depended on breastfeeding for an extended period while gradually learning to eat solid foods. This slower development matched our unusually long childhood. As children grew, they didn't suddenly become independent hunters. They learned little by little. Toddlers explored nearby plants. Older children practiced throwing sticks before ever using spears. They watched adults make tools, prepare food, and build shelters. Every ordinary day became a lesson in survival. Knowledge was just as valuable as food. In fact, passing knowledge from one generation to the next may have been one of the reasons humans became so successful. A child didn't need to rediscover which berries were poisonous. They didn't have to learn through dangerous trial and error which animals could be hunted safely. Their community had already collected that knowledge over countless generations. Parents and elders simply passed it on. This ability to share information gave humans an enormous advantage over many other species. But survival wasn't only about learning. Ancient children still faced dangers that no amount of experience could completely eliminate. Predators, harsh weather, infections, accidents, and periods of food shortage were constant threats. Some children undoubtedly didn't survive these challenges. Archaeological evidence and studies of traditional hunter-gatherer societies suggest that childhood mortality was much higher than it is today. Yet despite those hardships, enough children survived for human populations to grow, migrate, and eventually spread across nearly every continent. That success wasn't built on luck alone. It was built on preparation, cooperation, and thousands of years of accumulated experience. And perhaps the most surprising part is that some of those ancient parenting instincts are still visible today. The way families share childcare, the way grandparents often help raise grandchildren, the way children learn by watching adults long before they fully understand what they're seeing. These behaviors aren't recent inventions. They may be echoes of survival strategies that helped keep our species alive for hundreds of thousands of years. But how do scientists know any of this? After all, ancient campsites don't preserve conversations or parenting manuals. So what evidence allows researchers to reconstruct the childhood of people who lived tens of thousands of years ago? So how do scientists know what childhood looked like tens of thousands of years ago? After all, ancient campsites don't preserve bedtime stories. There are no parenting books buried beneath the soil, and no videos showing how prehistoric families cared for their children. Instead, researchers have to become detectives. Every tiny clue matters. A child's tooth, a worn stone tool, the remains of an ancient campree, even microscopic chemical traces locked inside bones can reveal surprising details about how children lived and sometimes how they died. One of the most valuable discoveries comes from ancient skeletons. Although children's bones are fragile and rarely survive for thousands of years, the ones that do can tell remarkable stories. Scientists can estimate a child's age from developing teeth and growing bones. They can identify signs of illness, nutritional stress, broken bones that healed, and even periods when food became scarce. Some skeletons reveal that children survived serious injuries. That tells us something important. A young child with a badly healed broken leg couldn't have hunted or gathered food alone. Someone had to protect them. Someone had to feed them. Someone had to care for them long enough for those bones to heal. In other words, compassion leaves evidence too. Researchers have also learned a great deal from ancient teeth. Teeth grow in layers, almost like the rings inside a tree. Hidden within those layers are tiny chemical signatures that record what a child ate during different stages of life. By studying these patterns, scientists can estimate when breastfeeding began, when children started eating solid foods, and sometimes even whether they experienced periods of starvation. It's like reading a biological diary written thousands of years ago. Archaeologists also look beyond bones. The layout of prehistoric camps can reveal how families lived together. Small hearths suggest shared living spaces. Clusters of tools hint at places where adults prepared food while children remained nearby. Tiny footprints preserved in ancient mud have even captured moments of children walking, running, and playing alongside adults. These aren't just footprints. They're snapshots of everyday life frozen in time. Modern hunter-gatherer societies provide another valuable source of insight. Groups such as the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Southern Africa, and the Aka of Central Africa don't live exactly as prehistoric humans did, and scientists are careful not to treat them as living fossils. However, studying how these communities cooperate, share food, care for children, and pass down knowledge offers useful clues about behaviors that may have deep evolutionary roots. Across many of these societies, one pattern appears again and again. Children are rarely cared for by only two parents. Grandparents, older siblings, relatives, and trusted members of the community all contribute. This doesn't prove ancient humans behaved in exactly the same way. But when archaeological evidence, evolutionary biology, and observations from modern hunter-gatherers all point in a similar direction, researchers gain greater condensation in their conclusions. And perhaps the biggest lesson is this: human childhood was never designed to be a solo journey. Our species evolved around cooperation. A baby wasn't simply the responsibility of one mother or one father. A child represented the future of the entire group. Every lesson taught, every meal shared, every danger avoided, every comforting embrace. Together, these small acts dramatically increased the chances that the next generation would survive. Ironically, the very thing that made human babies seem so vulnerable, their long, dependent childhood, may have become one of our greatest strengths. Because those extra years allowed children to learn language, master tools, build relationships, and absorb generations of accumulated knowledge. Other animals inherit mostly instincts. Humans inherit culture, and that may be the most powerful survival tool evolution ever produced. But there's one NAL question. If raising children together helped humans conquer nearly every environment on Earth, what does that reveal about who we are today? When people think about human evolution, they usually picture sharper spears, bigger brains, or mastering re. But one of our greatest evolutionary breakthroughs wasn't a tool at all. It was the way we cared for one another. Unlike most animals, humans invested years into raising each child. That long childhood required enormous amounts of food, patience, protection, and teaching. At RST glance, it seems incredibly inefficient. Why would evolution favor babies that take over a decade to become independent? Because those extra years gave humans something almost no other species could achieve: time to learn. A wolf is born with instincts that tell it how to hunt. A sea turtle hatches knowing it must crawl toward the ocean. Humans are different. We aren't born knowing how to make a spear, recognize poisonous plants, start a re, or track an animal through the forest. Those skills have to be taught, and that teaching takes time. A long childhood gave each generation the opportunity to inherit not just genes, but knowledge. Every lesson learned by parents could be passed to their children. Every successful hunt, every edible plant, every dangerous mistake. Instead of starting from zero, each generation began where the last one left off. Over thousands of years, that accumulated knowledge became one of humanity's greatest advantages. In many ways, culture became our second survival system. Archaeologists can actually see evidence of this growing complexity. Stone tools became more ornate. Hunting techniques improved. Shelters became better constructed. People learned to sew clothing, control re more effectively, and eventually create art. None of these achievements happened because one extraordinary individual changed history overnight. They happened because knowledge survived long enough to be shared. And knowledge survived because children survived. That's why prehistoric parenting wasn't simply about protecting one baby. It was about protecting the future of the entire group. Every child who reached adulthood carried the community's experience into the next generation. Some would become skilled hunters. Others would become expert gatherers. Some would discover new techniques for making tools. Others would one day become parents themselves, passing those lessons forward once again. This cycle continued for tens of thousands of years. Of course, prehistoric childhood was never easy. Many children died from illness, accidents, malnutrition, or harsh environmental conditions. Life expectancy at birth was much lower than it is today, largely because infant and child mortality were so high. But it's important to understand what those numbers actually mean. They don't mean that adults rarely lived beyond their 30s. Rather, many children never reached adulthood, while those who did could often live for decades more. Even in an incredibly dangerous world, enough children survived because families and communities continually adapted to improve their chances. That's the real story of human evolution. Not perfection, adaptation, trial and error, learning, cooperation. Again and again, generation after generation. And perhaps that's why humans eventually spread farther than any other primate. From the frozen Arctic to scorching deserts. From dense tropical forests to windswept mountains, that we didn't conquer these environments because we were the strongest animals. We conquered them because we shared food, we shared knowledge, and above all, we shared the responsibility of raising the next generation. The next time you see a parent comforting a crying child, a grandparent reading a bedtime story, or an older sibling helping a younger one learn something new, you're witnessing behaviors with incredibly deep evolutionary roots. Those simple moments may be echoes of survival strategies that helped our ancestors endure for hundreds of thousands of years. In the end, the greatest invention of ancient humans wasn't the spear, or even language. It was cooperation. Because long before we built civilizations, cooperation allowed us to protect our most vulnerable members. And by protecting our children, we protected the future of our species. If you enjoyed uncovering how ancient families helped humanity survive, there are countless other hidden stories from prehistory waiting to be explored. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.